The Bible is full of images expressing themes that run right through the whole narrative. We need to examine each of these images closely. We need to see how they all connect us to the larger story. We need to read the images. At the beginning of the book of Genesis, we find that tragedy enters the story very early on. Cain and Abel, the two sons of Adam and Eve, have an argument for whatever reason, and Cain kills his brother Abel and hides his body in the dirt. And Cain thereafter is forced to go away from Eden and from the land where he'd been. And Cain, nevertheless, has the instinct to create a community. He builds a city in Genesis 4. And the idea of Cain building a city, I think, is deeply ambiguous. It's as though he knows in his bones that we humans are supposed to be community builders. But the city is going to turn into a nightmare. And as the story goes forwards, we see that human communities grow and blossom and do all sorts of things. But in Genesis 11, it turns into the Tower of Babel, where the humans in their arrogance want to build a tower to get up to God. This is, as it were, Cain's type of a dream of human community gone to its logical extension. That Cain the murderer, Cain the one who wants things his own way, is then fulfilled in these people who, instead of going out into the world and bringing good news of whatever sort and fruitfulness to the rest of creation, they want to organize their world their way. They have one language, they want to keep it that way. The Tower of Babel symbolizes human arrogance. There's a lovely touch in the middle of Genesis 11 when it says, they built their tower going up, as though it was up to the heavens. And God comes down to inspect this little construction that they're building. And this is actually parallel to the movement that you get in Psalm 2, when the nations are raging and shouting against God, and God looks down and laughs at them and says, I know a better trick than that. And so God confuses and divides their tongues so that they can no longer proceed with their arrogant project. And then you get this amazing contrast. Instead of the Tower of Babel, which is a monument to human arrogance and to the desire that we, this family, this people, we will be in charge of our destiny, God then, in the next chapter, chapter 12, calls Abram, who later is called Abraham. Abram is a childless nomad. This is the symbol of grace, of the living God saying, I've got a better way of doing human community, and let me show you how that's going to work. That contrast persists all the way on through the whole Old Testament and still on into the New as well. And as the children of Israel become a nation, and when they're living in their promised land, they wrestle with the fact that they're a small nation surrounded by large and powerful nations. Egypt to the south, Syria to the north, Babylon to the northeast. And there are certain points where Babylon comes into the story, Babylon being the same as Babel, Babylon. And so in Isaiah 13 and 14, we see the prophet denouncing Babylon because it is absolutely like the Tower of Babel. It's arrogant, it's demonic, it's satanic. It's trying to replace God the Creator with a different force, a different power, which all consists in human arrogance, human violence, human wickedness of every sort. And then one of the most extraordinary tragic moments in that story is in Isaiah chapter 39, when King Hezekiah, having been rescued from an apparently fatal illness, Hezekiah then has a visit from the king of Babylon, or rather from his representatives. Hezekiah is so pleased that this great king, Hezekiah had been afraid of Assyria, but now here's Babylon. They're further away, they're the other side of Assyria. Maybe they'll be friendly. So Hezekiah is delighted with the messengers from Babylon, and he shows them all his royal house, all his treasure. And the prophet Isaiah comes to him, and he says basically, if you will not have the promises of God, you will have Babylon, because actually Babylon is where it's all going to go. One day, after your time, okay, but one day, the king of Babylon is going to send his army, and all the treasures of your house and of the temple of the Lord will be taken away to Babylon. That's one of the most shocking moments in the whole story that resonates through to us today. If we will not have the promises of God, then we will have Babel, Babylon. If we will not live by trust that God is going to look after us, then we are in fact buying into that system of human arrogance which creates a Babel every time and every place that it can. And so the heart of the Old Testament story is the tragedy of the Judean people being taken into exile in Babylon. By the waters of Babylon we sat down and wept, says Psalm 137, when we remembered Zion. And the people who'd taken us captive used to mock us and say, well, can't you sing a song for us? We've heard that you've had wonderful music in your temple in Jerusalem. Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing Yahweh's song in a strange land? And remembering Jerusalem, if I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Jerusalem is where I belong, not Babylon. And that contrast of Babylon as a place of human arrogance and wickedness and violence, and the arrogance of human empire contrasts with Jerusalem as a place of joy and peace, as it was supposed to be, as a place where people could go and know that they were free because God had set them free from all that had enslaved them. And so you then get the book of Lamentations, the Lamentations of Jeremiah, lamenting the appalling situation of Jerusalem being destroyed and of Babylon coming in. Babylon is a parody of the reality. It's trying to get the world that God wants, but without paying due homage, allegiance to God the Creator, trying to get things for ourselves which can only come as God's gift. And so this echoes through into the New Testament, and that Babylon becomes a symbol in the New Testament, probably at the time a symbol of Rome. That wasn't difficult to make out because, after all, Rome was the great power of the day in the 1st century AD and for some centuries to come. And so the word Babylon could be used as a symbol for Rome. In 1 Peter 5, Peter talks about, cryptically, about the church that is in Babylon, meaning, of course, the people who are in Rome. And Babylon is a symbol which is larger than Rome. It's vital for understanding how human community goes bad. We see this particularly in Revelation 17 and 18, where Babylon symbolizes centripetal greed. We're going to grab everything we can, all the goods and all the fine linen and all the gold and silver and all the slaves and everything else that's out there in the world. We want it all here in Rome. It all really belongs to us. That is Babylonian, that is Babel-like, rather than the New Jerusalem, where the gates are open day and night. And yes, the kings of the earth bring their treasures into it, but it's a place of joy and peace, a place from which good news will go out, so that the trees which grow by the river of the water of life in Revelation 21 and 22, the leaves of the tree will be for the healing of the nations. That's the opposite of the Babylonian vision. So we find in the New Testament this kind of implicit Christian critique of all human arrogance, the human arrogance that builds systems, that builds actual buildings, and that builds political and social structures in order to make sure that it's all right, that it has everything it wants, and who cares about anybody else. And as we today navigate our way through God's world, it's important to recognize this tendency and to see it particularly when people say, well, there is this thing called religion or this thing called spirituality. That's off to one side. We're going to do society and make a country or a culture without reference to that. That is the Babel-like impulse, which is the parody of the reality. The reality is a godly structure which allows for human freedom, which enables people to blossom and flourish as the image bearers that they were meant to be. Life is God's gift, and Jerusalem symbolizes that. Babel symbolizes the arrogance of human empire. But it's difficult. We can't simply see anything that looks vaguely imperial and demonize it and say, there's nothing there for us. But beware of ignoring the Babylonian temptation, especially allowing a state to go its own way, whatever sort of a state it is. So we have in the New Testament implicitly a Christian critique of what happens when humans try to grab power for themselves and make their own world in their own ways, including if they either ignore Christianity and say, well, that's over on the side somewhere, it's nothing to do with us, or if they try to co-opt it and say, we'll have a little bit of Christianity and that'll help our state go even better. These are difficult issues, but we gain nothing by pretending they're not there. We need to remind ourselves of that great story in Genesis 11 and 12 and of how it worked out with exile and restoration. And we need to pray for wisdom that the cities that we build, the literal cities and the metaphorical cities, will be modeled on the coming Jerusalem, which is to be a place of peace, a place of hope, a place of life rather than a place of death. Please feel free to click the link to watch the next video in this sequence.